Welcome home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We are Baltimore positive. I don't know if you can see me, but you can see Luke. I think Luke's going to be staring at the screen all 25 minutes because we're in another country. We're in Toronto, Canada, where the Orioles are 1-0 and headed for the weekend. They'll be doing opening day back in Baltimore on Monday. We will be at Fadley's of Lexington Market on Wednesday. It is all brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. Lucas, how's your neck doing? All those home runs up there, jerk left, jerk right, big bombs, Adley Rutschman, Cedric Mullins. What a day. And then the Canadian with all the muscles muscling up as well. Tony who? Tony Taters, what happened to him?
Well, I can tell you from the press box, which is tucked up down the left field line, right by the left field foul pole. I had a good view from all those home runs that were sailing into the Orioles bullpen or over the Orioles bullpen in right field. But hey, we talked about it throughout the spring with all the angst for the pitching. That will continue to be there, right? I mean, it's one game, one of 162. But we talked about this offense and this group of young position talent. And more specifically, we talked a lot about Adley Rutschman. I mean, this is a two-time All-Star catcher who had a total of 3 home runs after the All-Star break last year. But I think you and I both said, despite our concerns and despite our sparring about the pitching and whether they were going to have enough, whether they will have enough ultimately, we always were high on the idea that they were going to hit the ball, and they certainly did on opening day, no question about it. I mean, you hit 6 home runs, a franchise record for an opening day. Tyler O'Neill, as you mentioned, I mean, he extends his major league record for homering in consecutive opening days. And Adley Rutschman with 2 bombs, Mullins with 2 bombs, Jordan Westberg, Zach Eflin goes 6. I mean, a rock solid performance from him. You'll take that, right? I mean, if that's the formula, you'll go 162-0.
Well, rock
Obviously, they won't
solid
do
pitching
that.
performance is where it's at. We knew they're going to hit the ball, right? Like when you get 6 innings out of your number one starter that we have argued might be a number three in other places, but certainly gave him a number one starter start to start the season. And they're not going to get that every night, Luke. They're not.
Well, uh, but I will say this: it's not as though Zach Eflin was dominant, right? I mean, first couple innings got quite a bit of swing and miss with the sweeper. Had a couple strikeouts in the first 2 innings, and I think he had one swinging strike the rest of the way. Uh, Second time through the order, I will say Toronto did hit the ball harder. I'm with Brandon Hyde. Even if we weren't talking about the first start of the year, I'm not sure how much longer you're going to have Eflin go anyway, just based on third time through the order, that the fact that they were hitting the ball harder. But this is who he is. He's going to be a guy that is going to mix his pitches. He's not going to walk people. He had 1 walk. We know his career walk rate. We've talked about that, and he's going to get you into the 6th or 7th inning. Right? And he's not a bona fide true number one in the way that Corbin Burns is, but he's someone that this team's going to need to be very dependable in that way, right? I mean, whether you think he's a number 3 for other contenders or not, he's the Orioles' number 1 right now. And until Grayson Rodriguez walks through that door with a healthy arm, or they acquire someone between now and the trade deadline, Zach Eflin's going to be that guy. So he gave them what they needed. And if that's the formula, and obviously it doesn't carry as much clout when you've scored 12 runs in a game, but if that's the kind of game where you score 4 or 5 runs, he gives you a heck of a chance to win there if you get good bullpen work after him. So, but Zach Eflin he kind of epitomizes what the Orioles are trying to do right now. He's not as old as their other veteran starters that are in this rotation, but we're talking about guys who aren't necessarily going to get a ton of swing and miss, although Charlie Morton still strikes out people. But you're talking about guys that are, pitchability guys that are going to eat innings for them, guys that they're hoping will go through an order twice and give them a decent chance to win. It doesn't mean it's going to be dominant, doesn't mean it's going to be shiny numbers like Corbin Burns is capable of doing, but it got the job done, more than got the job done on Thursday when you're talking about giving up 2 runs and 2 hits in 6 innings. So, that's kind of, I don't want to say that Zach Eflin can't do any better than that, because he'll pitch 7 innings here and there over the course of a season. I mean, you don't see that much from anyone in this day and age, but you get those kind of starts, you'll take that, because they are going to hit the ball for the most part. Not 6 home runs a night, right? I mean, we're not talking about, that's pretty extreme, but we see what kind of power capability this team has. And oh, yeah, they did that without their best player, who is beginning a minor league rehab assignment in Norfolk this weekend. So, good day for the Orioles. Good way to start a 4 game series. When you get that first game, that's where you look at it and say, hey, try to win a series, try to get off to a good start here on the road before you come home and play the Boston Red Sox. So lots to like. Not sure there was anything to dislike about that opening day performance. And the Orioles certainly took it to the Jays, who had very, very little to celebrate on Thursday, even as they were excited to welcome Anthony Santander.
Well, to your point, if they're going to hit 6 home runs in a game, they're going to win a lot of
Yeah,
games,
I
right? I mean,
mean, sure.
that's where it's at. That's not going to happen every night over the course of the history of Major League Baseball. But the pitching itself, and we're going to judge it series by series, and that you always speak in those terms of, hey, win a series, win 2 out of 3, win 2 out of 3, you win a lot of games, right? But then it's the rest of the rotation in the bottom when you start going into the bullpen in a game maybe you're losing, right? Maybe you're losing a game 7-4, and you feel like, well, we'll score some runs late in the game. We got to stop the bleeding. I don't know where that's going to come from and when it starts to stack up. Usually the early season, you get a lot of off days, you get rain days, you get all that. It's not going to rain in Toronto this weekend. It might rain in Baltimore on Monday, but it's supposed to be really nice when they get home for opening day Monday. Just stretching out this pitching and seeing where it is. I mean, getting 6 innings from a starter on opening day is just a big deal to begin with, I think. Just to know you have a guy that every fifth day is going to be able to have that sort of length to him, because whenever Rodriguez comes back, it's not going to be anything like that.
Yeah, and look, I mean, early in the season, you're not having guys throw 100 pitches. I mean, not that we see guys throw 100 pitches that frequently anymore anyway. Think if you went back and looked at the Orioles rotation last year, you wouldn't find many start. I mean, even Corbin Burns, how many times did he actually throw 100 plus pitches? Not very often. But you could probably count on one hand, maybe two.
They were saving
Uh,
his arm so Arizona could pay him.
yeah, but that's just the nature of the beast. I mean, we've talked about it. That's why, to a degree, I kind of follow what Mike Elias has tried to do. I'm not saying it's going to work, but I can at least follow what they're trying to do. But on Thursday, I thought it was interesting. They went to Sir Anthony Dominguez when they did. Keep in mind, he entered the game. It was 9-2, but it was 6-2 when he was warming up. I thought that was surprising on the heels of him having a very rough spring training. And yeah, he threw a scoreless inning, but walked two, gave up a hit. I mean, that's not ideal. So he's working through some things. They had Baker pitch the ninth. Aiken pitched the eighth inning for the Orioles. You just look at that. I mean, your other higher leverage guys in the pen are well rested now as you go into the weekend, and this is as clean as the bullpen will be all year long, other than maybe coming out of the All-Star break, right? I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. So if you're Brandon Hyde, you love the fact that Zach Eflin gave you 6 innings. I mean, 78 pitches. I mean, 13 pitches per inning. That's a really good ratio. If you listen to Jim Palmer or Ben McDonald on the telecast, they'll tell you, you're kind of shooting for 15. Right, kind of speaking in terms of realistic expectations. So he was very efficient. As I mentioned, didn't strike many people out, but he did the job. And the bullpen, you don't like the walks, from Dominguez and Aiken, but you also understand there's nerves. These guys are pitching in a true meaningful game for the first time since last October. So yeah, there's a little bit of that going on, but yeah, you hit 6 home runs, you score 12 runs, your pitching's not going to be an issue, right? You score 5, 6, 7 runs a night with regularity, your pitching's not going to be a major issue. I said it to you going into the start of the season. If you look at how pitching staffs profile in 2025, for the most part, assuming you have a good offense, which the Orioles have, assuming you're going to defend well, which I think the Orioles will when it's all said and done, you can get by with either your rotation or your bullpen having some issues. You can't get by most likely if you're going to have below average performance from both. I mean, that's just not going to work. You're not going to score 7 or 8 runs a game in 2025. A great offense scores 5 runs a game in 2025. I mean, that's just the reality of where we are in baseball in general right now. So good start. They used 3 bullpen arms in the first game. That's not surprising because guys aren't stretched out in the way they are in midseason form coming out of spring training. So you'll take it. And now it's a matter of looking at the rest of the weekend, and it's Morton and Kramer and Sagano, and you're hoping that at least 2 of those 3 guys give you something close to a quality start. And if you do that, then you've got a great chance to win a series.
Watching Sagano on Sunday is going to be great. We're going to be home for that. By the way, shout out to John Martin and our friends at the Maryland Lottery for Home Run Riches. If John does not appear next week, it's because he's trying to figure out how to pay everybody. All these home runs going out. Thoughts on Cedric Mullins? I mean, it's we'll talk about O'Neill, we'll talk about the other guys, but you and I privately on Thursday night after the game while we were watching the Terps season end, we'll get to that later. That the Mullins thing's interesting because he was such a great player, and on the cusp of that, left-handed pitching's a problem for him. But then on opening day, hits a couple of home runs. Dude, last opening day, if you and I would have really had the saliva test on this, done the Charlie Ekman test, and said, "Is Cedric Mullins going to be on this team on opening day of 2025?" I think you and I would have bet against that, right?
Um, I mean, I don't know. I mean, he's still a valuable player. I mean, last year uneven, right? I mean, really got off to a bad start.
It was
To
him
the
and Hayes last year that we talked about for a lot, and Hayes is the one that was expendable, turns
I
out.
mean, he was, but at the same time, Cedric Mullins still plays a good center field, and there's a premium value to that. That if you offer anything offensively, that you're still going to have a place in a club. Now, that said, do I think they're going to re-sign him as he's now entering his contract year? No, I don't. I think they're. I think he'll be playing elsewhere in 2026, most likely. You're hoping that he has the kind of year that probably not going to be a qualifying offer guy, but if he has another 30-30 year, which I don't think we are expecting, I don't think anyone's expecting that. I mean, and that's where you look at it. You mentioned a few years ago he had a great season. I think that's where you look at it 3 years later and you say outlier. 4 years later, that was the outlier. It was a great season. He was an all-star. He deserved to be an all-star that year. But you look at what he's been since then, 721 OPS, 721 OPS, 710 OPS last year. I mean, that's what you're talking about. I think he's settled in. I think you
Well, the
see what,
expectations are lower, and the reality's lower than
yeah.
what
I
his
mean,
star was.
you don't judge someone off of their career year. I mean, Cal Ripken, the Cal Ripken of 1983 or 1991, wasn't what he was every single year. Those were the peak seasons, and God bless him. I mean, he was a Hall of Famer. But and Cedric Mullins is an above average player, but he was a 6-win player in 2021 when he hit 30 home runs and had 30 stolen bases. Since then, he's been a guy who hits somewhere in the neighborhood of 15, 16, 17 home runs and steals. The stolen bases have fluctuated a little bit here and there because he's had some 2 years ago had the multiple groin injuries that really limited him in that capacity. But for what he is, he's a quality player. He's age 30 season at this point in time. So you do kind of wonder at what point do you slow down? At what point does your defense in center field not really be what it was for the bulk of your 20s? But the Orioles are glad to have him for 2025 and hits 2 home runs on opening day. I mean, that's great. So I'm a big Cedric Mullins guy. I think we all think back to him replacing Adam Jones and then that first full year with Brandon Hyde and Mike Elias where Mullen struggled so dramatically in the month of April to the point where he was sent down, to the point where he struggled at AAA, and he was in Bowie midway through that 2019 season. I mean, that speaks to how far he had fallen and what he's done since then. So, I certainly am not expecting the Orioles to extend him. I think it probably wouldn't be the best investment unless he's willing to take a short-term deal. But he's valuable to you right now, and he's was a big part of winning on opening day. And I think if you can keep him away from left-handed starting pitching, he can have a really quality season. I think that's proven out at this point in time. It really struggled 2 of the last 3 years against left-handed pitching. I think that's just kind of the reality. So 2021 was a great year. I don't, just because he hits 2 home runs on opening day doesn't mean I think he's hitting 30 home runs again, but it's a good start. And it's important for him because regardless of his future with the Orioles, it's a big year for him in the sense of wanting to put his best foot forward to wherever he's playing next year, whether it's Baltimore or one of the 29 other teams that he wants to have the kind of season that makes him look appealing. And I still think Cedric Mullins is an appealing player, even if he's not that all-star that he was 4 years ago at this point in time.
Luke, you and I got to the ballpark, the Sky Dome, early on Thursday for opening day. I was in there real early, and I'm not a real media member like you, but I was down near the field. I saw Mark Shapiro down there, and it was quiet. And they were taking BP, and the giant video board they have in center field there is really loud because it's a dome, and there was nobody in there. It was early BP, and they did a big feature on Tony Taters, and it was Blue Jays magazine for an hour during BP, right? So I'm seeing their players and a lot of Dunedin and a lot of welcome to the team. And Tony Taters did a whole thing on making steaks outside and how he left Venezuela when he was 14 to go to the academy and he had to learn how to make food and he cooked for his teammates and did all this stuff. And then they welcome him out onto the field as the Silver Slugger, as a Blue Jay, and he nodded to the Orioles dugout. I don't know that you and I have spent, and I go back over the last 4 or 5 months, talking at length about Tyler O'Neill for Santander in regard to money, in regard to expectation, in regard to not how opening day is going to be, but how the end of the season is going to be and where the value is and all of that. Revisit that for me as we go through this because Santander became part of the furniture to some degree, and he was taken for granted as Rule 5 and all that. They never really had to pay him a lot of money. Now he gets that big contract. Here in Toronto, they're bringing him in as, I don't know, some sort of Encarnacion or Batista. I don't, know what they think he's going to be, but they think he's going to hit 40 home runs because he had 40 last year. And in the Tyler O'Neill case, and I made reference this a couple weeks ago, Peter King, my dear friend, Sports Illustrated Peter King, NBC Peter King, Monday morning quarterback. Peter King's a big baseball fan, and he and I flirt back and forth on text. And the Tyler O'Neill thing was interesting to him because he was a Red Sox, and he said, "Yeah, he'll hit 41 home runs in 98 games because he's going to get hurt. And then what are you going to do, right? So what are you going to do? You have Kerstad, you have all of these other options here. But in the case of Santander and money, and Tyler O'Neill and money, and what player you want on your team over the next 3 years, if you think you're going to win a championship in the next 2 or 3 years. Where are you on what they did with Santander and giving money to O'Neill and how it's going to play? It certainly smells pretty good day after opening day when O'Neill comes to Canada and plays like a real Canadian.
Yeah, I mean, and just to kind of recap the deals, I mean, it's 3 years, 49.5 million for O'Neill. He has an opt out after year one, so if opening day is any indication, he might be here 1 year. This might be a Nelson Cruz kind of situation if it comes to that. And of course, we're a long ways away from that. I'm being facetious, but
So
Santander
they
five.
guaranteed him 50 if he stinks. If he's really good, he's gone.
I mean, if
That's
he's,
kind of the deal.
I mean, you know, I I don't know if it's necessarily if he stinks. I think a lot of it is that also is dependent on how healthy he is. I mean, that's been the knock on Tyler O'Neill. He's been a productive player when he's been healthy. I mean, when he's go back and look at what he did. I was just talking about Cedric Mullins in 2021. I mean, Tyler O'Neill didn't make the All-Star team, but should have that year. I mean, he was a 6-win player. He had 34 home runs, drove in 80. He had a 912 OPS, batted 286. He had 26 doubles. I mean, he in 138 games. The problem is he hasn't been a guy that's been able to play 138 games consistently. So, the Orioles got him at a little bit of a discount on that front. He hit 31 home runs, albeit playing half his games at Fenway last year. I think you always take that into account. But hey, the left field wall at Camden Yards is much more forgiving than it used to be. So he has that going for him. It's probably a big reason why he signed with the Orioles. We talked about the left field wall being moved in, and we'll continue to talk about that, I'm sure. But injuries have been a problem for him. This guy's also, we forget, he's a two-time Gold Glove outfielder as well. So this isn't just muscle-bound home run hitting guy that can't really do anything else. I mean, he's been able to field. He's still Probably not going to steal bases for the Orioles at this point because I think that's something that they're going to try to keep him out of harm's way, trying to do that. But he stole 15 or 14 bases back-to-back years in 21 and 22. So, this guy's a good athlete. I mean, he's ripped. I think we saw that. This guy's definitely in the gym a whole lot. But, I think the Orioles are looking at how he profiled against left-handed pitching with the issues that they had on that front last year, really going back the last couple years, and acknowledging, yes, Santander swung from both sides of the plate, but with O'Neill, will kind of being a guy that he'll start against every lefty, and early on, at the very least, he's going to start regularly against right-handers. But as I've noted to you, and we talked about this over the winter, he's been a little more underwhelming against right-handed starters over the last few years. He's kind of been a 700 OPS guy, actually slightly under that. So maybe that opens the door then to take him out of the lineup sometimes in those spots and get Heston Kjerstad a few more at bats. So when it's not just a straight trade up of Santander for O'Neill, it's O'Neill and mixing in Heston Kjerstad, right? I mean, it's the idea is to try to mix in some of your young talent here as well. And we're going to see how that's going to play out because they're going to have a roster crunch here in the not too distant
Well, hey,
future.
man, I'm going to be writing a letter to Katie Griggs this week and Mike Elias, and you're monitoring on the field, and I'm monitoring off the field. But this was strategized. This was a grown-up decision. They're not dumb. They're not just throwing darts. They made this decision after long meetings, right? And this was the direction they decided to go in. I guess just opening day is a great day to pull it apart when Santander's on the other side and say, how do you think this is going to work out? And do you think Santander is a guy who's going to diminish over the next couple of years? I'm not sure. I don't have an opinion on this, just the observation of my eyes being open on it. And to your point, trying to get Kjerstad, throwing to get some of these young guys at bats. Cowser's an everyday player now. Mullins is not, right? And how the three outfield positions, let's say first base and DH, how all of that works, and even catching, because Rutschman's not going to catch 150 games, right? So how they're going to platoon in and out, righty, lefty,
Yeah.
and how Hyde's going to manage this. And then at the end of the year, how you and I are going to say, hey, they were really smart for signing O'Neill and not giving Santander a thing. Even if it winds up like Corbin Burns, where like he's just so good, he has this monster 41 home run year like Santander, and they're either going to have to pay him more or watch him go off and, play for the Dodgers or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean the reality is Santander wasn't going to take a 3-year deal for $50 million. I mean, he just wasn't. So you look at it in terms of, okay, what do you project them both of those players to be in 2025? What do you project them to be in 26? So, we can't even really judge it after 1 year unless it is the scenario of what you just mentioned. O'Neill hits 45 home runs for the Orioles, regardless, even if Santander has a good year. You look at that and say, okay, but the Santander part, you got to look at how that deal ages. I mean, I like Santander a lot, but he's 30. I think he's someone that is probably not going to be an outfielder much longer, if we're
Well, they've moved him
being
to left field
realistic.
in Toronto, right?
I mean, he's playing left, but if you told me right now where I think he's going to play in 2 years, I'm thinking he's probably going to be a first baseman. And if Vlad Guerrero resigns, then he'll be a DH, right? I mean, it's looking at that. So I understood what they were doing, and for as much as we talk about O'Neill's injury history, I mean, Santander until a couple years ago was the guy that couldn't stay healthy, right? And look, I give him a lot of credit because I know a lot of work went into getting his body to a place physically where he could play 150 games a year, which was not his reality until 2022. So, look, I'm not going to sit here and say that I was 100% opposed to re-signing Santander, but I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say I would have been enthusiastic about giving him a 5-year deal either. I think you
And
need
again,
to
we're playing
be
with Mr. Rubenstein's money here, where it
sure.
feels like they're giving $20 million to 40-year-old pitchers, right? Literally,
Sure.
right?
Well, but
They
those
need
are one.
pitching more. That's the other thing. The organization will fill in whatever Tyler O'Neill and Anthony Santander because you're expecting Rutschman to lift, you're expecting Holiday to lift, you're expecting
Sure.
all Cowser, all these guys to lift and be better players, so that Santander isn't your best player or your only power hitter.
Right. And I mean, again, when you're looking at these guys that they get to age 30, that's where you have to really look and see, okay, who's going to age well, right? I mean, I don't need to remind anyone in this town of where the Orioles were 10 years ago with Chris Davis. I mean, 2015 was his contract year. We're 10 years later, and we know how that played out. And even though there's a lot of revisionist history at work, but there are a lot of people that wanted the Orioles to re-sign Chris Davis, and they did.
I
And it
have
was
a
an utter
status that Don
disaster.
Moeller put up when Don was doing the show with me,
But he
and he
wasn't
said,
alone.
if we don't sign Chris Davis, I'm done with the Orioles. And I'm thinking that was pretty popular sentiment back then,
It
especially
was.
given Angelos's situation and that Machado was unsignable. They're in a different world now where, like, I don't know that there's any pressure on the new owner to necessarily do anything right now, um, other than let's see how it plays out, because they've got good enough position players, to your point, to hit 6 home runs and win any game. They can win any game. But that being
Yeah.
said, back in October, they didn't hit the ball. And
Well,
yeah,
but that's also, I mean, that's any team that can be in that spot, right? I mean, we've talked about it a lot with the Dodgers over the last 10 years. I mean, they've been extraordinary in the regular season. And yes, of course, they won the World Series last October, and everyone thinks they're going to win it this year because they have an absurd payroll at this point in time. But we've seen the Dodgers win 100 plus games in the regular season and then bow out in the divisional round because it's just the nature of baseball. You have a bad 3 or 4 days, then you're done. Now, the Orioles last year, that was on the heels of a bad second half. So it was kind of a continuation.
but we're going to
Uh,
be monitoring their pitching the whole
but,
way. We're not going
but
to
I,
talk about
but
whether they're going to hit the ball in October or not. We're just going to assume they are. We're
right.
going to
But
be way more worried about the pitching.
yeah, noted.
And I'm already talking about October like they're making the playoffs.
Well, I
We
mean,
we haven't sat here the day after opening day and talked about, hey, how's the pitching look in October? I mean, dude, I've been doing this 34 years. That's the rarefied air we're on, that you're in Toronto and I'm in Toronto and we're on the road and they are expected to win 90 games. And how they get there, they're going to hit the ball. It's really going to be about how this pitching goes and the decisions that they've made. Santander for O'Neill, and even Rodriguez being hurt and Henderson being hurt right now. And I know you're not as concerned about him, but they do look like a different team when he's not out there.
oh, sure. And that's why it was so nice. I mean, it looks like there's a good chance he'll be back by the end of the Boston series, for that next road trip. I mean, keep in mind they come home for 3 games and then they're back on the road. So he's playing in Norfolk this weekend. That was the plan, as Brandon Hyde disclosed on opening day. And it's really just a matter of him getting some live game reps and ramping up and getting his clock back, which a guy like Gunnar Henderson, I'm guessing, is not going to need much more than this next week to do that. So I think he's going to be back. But one final point, because you said something and it really resonated with me. You made a point because we were talking about the Chris Davis thing, and I'm not, just the example here is perfect though, because you mentioned there was talk about Chris Davis because even at that point there was already thoughts, resignation that are they going to be able to re-sign? Are they going to re-sign Manny Machado? Are they going to try to re-sign Manny Machado? How much is it going to cost? And 2015, he was still a few years away from hitting the market. But you made mention that if they weren't going to be able to re-sign Machado, then well, you got to extend Chris Davis. See, you can't have that kind of binary thought. The worst thing the Orioles could do would be to extend Anthony Santander simply because you're leery and unsure about your ability to extend Gunnar Henderson a few years from now. So you need to
Or
make
giving
every
Jordan Westberg the sun, the moon, and the stars because they can't find. I mean,
yeah,
I was a guy that wanted them to sign Jonathan Scope, dude. Right? I was for
sure. And he was out of
So
baseball a couple years later,
right. I
right?
mean, and in 15, it was about Scope. It was about Adam Jones. It was
Sure,
about Markakis. It was about Tillman. It was about Britton. And in the end, they all got away. In the end, Britton made his money in New York. Markakis went to Atlanta. Adam Jones went to Japan. And it all fell apart. That can't happen again. And they have to make better decisions with the money,
sure.
no matter what the money is. And I'm look, I'm not here to spend Mr. Moneybags' money, but in the end of the day, letting the Santanders walk often becomes a much better decision than signing them in a general sense. And that's me being an old guy and talking about it's not my money, but I know what a weight it is when you give the money to the wrong guy. And
Yeah.
the
And
Mets
that's,
might find that out with with some of the deals that they've signed.
well, look, as great as Juan Soto is, and he is great, right? I mean, he's an unbelievable hitter. Where do you think he's going to be playing 5 years from now? Or okay, let's even be generous and kind to him. Where do you think he's going to be playing 7 years from now defensively?
The bench.
He's going to be a DH,
Right.
right? So like you just think about that. A 700 million, like that kind of contract for a guy that is going to profile as a DH for the second half of it. Now, if he continues to be a guy that has a thousand OPS and does that, then you'll still be happy with that, right? I mean, David Ortiz was a career DH and he's a Hall of Famer, regardless of how you might feel about him here in Baltimore. But I think when you look at these kind of deals, when you look at pondering what to do with a free agent, I think the Orioles looked at it. I think Mike Elias and Sig Mejdal looked at it through the lens of, okay, what do you think Tyler O'Neill is going to be in 2025? What do you think Anthony Santander is going to be in 2025? And I'm guessing when they looked at it, they saw O'Neill with the profile that he might profile to hit more home runs. When you consider he hit 30 plus last year in not even close to a full season compared to Santander, who hit 44 but had never hit more than 33 in a full season before. So I think they looked at it in terms of, okay, what's the 2025 bet? And then what's the potential bet if O'Neill doesn't opt out? And then what would be the bet of what Santander is over 5 years? I think they were comfortable with the idea of not being locked into a 5 year commitment, knowing that he probably isn't going to age the best, knowing he's probably going to profile as a first baseman. And they have Kobe Mayo and they have Samuel Basayo, and you still have Ryan Mountcastle for that matter. And you kind of look at your options that you have down the pike. And they decided, Tony, we love you, but we're not going to give you a 5 year deal. And I'm okay with that. But you've got to make smart decisions. You've got to have smart contingency plans. That's why I said it's not just Tyler O'Neill, because chances are Tyler O'Neill is going to be on the IL at some point this year, maybe a couple times this year. When you look at someone who has played more than 113 games once in his career. So that's why Heston Kjerstad needs to factor in there. And that's why they've got to have other guys that are going to hit the ball. So you need depth. That's as much as we've talked in terms of, what are you doing with Kjerstad? Last year it was, where are you with Kyle Stowers and Connor Norby? I mean, like, are these guys just going to rot at AAA? And
And that Kyle Stowers hitting that walk off in
he
Miami.
did.
How
That,
about
that, that
that?
was good for him.
That's your guy.
Great kid, a nice young man, and I'm glad to see him getting an opportunity, and I'm rooting for him. But you look at these guys, when you do have someone like a Tyler O'Neill, who you love the upside, you love what he can do. I mean, reaches base 5 times on opening day. I mean, that's well and good. But you also understand he was on the IL 3 different times for the Red Sox last year. So that's where Heston Kjerstad becomes more important. That's why you need to have that depth. And, we're going to see how this plays out. Let me be very clear. Just because I am saying that I agree with the Orioles and that I would not have given Santander a 5 year deal doesn't mean it won't end up being the wrong decision if he ends up being a great player in Toronto over the next 4 years at the very
Well, we look
least.
back at Nelson Cruz as a mistake. That was a mistake.
Oh, I mean, but at the same time, that's a mistake a lot of teams would have made at that point in time. I mean, it's not as though when the Mariners signed Cruz that he had 10 teams lining up to give him 4 year deals. I mean, he was older and talking about someone who played into his early 40s. So good for him. It's something that did not work out for the Orioles, but the overall prevailing point, and you made the point, and I wholeheartedly agree, and that's where it's tough right now because the Orioles are in this place where you want them to springboard and go for it, right? And augment what they already have. But this is where we go back to, even though it's a different sport and they have a salary cap, but you look at how the Ravens operate. They build from within. You want to draft and develop your own players, and the Orioles have gotten pretty good at that here over the last few years. I mean, thank goodness because they had to lose a lot to pick the players that they did early on. But that is still the way to go, more so than looking at free agents and signing those guys. And even looking at your own guys and saying, we need to extend this guy, we need to extend this guy, we need to, you still need to be judicious with that. I think you even find sometimes when you extend your own players, you got to be careful that it's the right guy. So, hey, they've got a lot of work to do on that front here over the next few years, and we're going to see how it plays out. But I can't sit here with any strong conviction and bash them for not re-signing Anthony Santander. I think he's going to be a good player in Toronto for the next couple of years, but I think the position, how he's going to hold up durability wise as he gets into year 3, 4, 5 of that deal. That's where I have a little more question, but we'll see. I'm rooting for him because good guy, great story as a Rule 5 pick, and I'll always have an affinity for the Santanders, the Austin Hayes, Cedric Mullins, Mountcastle, the guys that lost a lot at the major league level at the beginning of their careers to finally have a chance to enjoy some of the winnings. So, all the best to him. But I think the Orioles, hopefully they catch lightning in a bottle with Tyler O'Neill, at least for this season, and then you'll kind of figure out whether he opts out and where you go from there.
Yeah, they might lose some more, but they got off to a good start on Thursday in Toronto. Luke and I are in Toronto at Skydome all weekend long. We will be at Camden Yards on Monday. Terps eliminated, the whole Kevin Willard thing. We'll be talking about that as well. All of it up at Baltimore Positive. We'll see you on Wednesday at Fadley's in the afternoon before the Red Sox game. Good weather all weekend long. We are in Toronto. He is Luke. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore Positive.